Hello everyone and welcome back to Riverview, or sort of realistic North American themed metropolitan area here in City Skylines 2. Today's episode is going to be a little different as I'll be emphasizing changes to the map here. And the primary reason for me wanting to do that is that if you recall, Riverview was the very first city I started back when I was fortunate enough to get early access to City Skylines 2. And I think it's safe to say that in the meantime, I've gotten quite a bit better at playing the game, especially using developer mode and mods. And I've also had a bit of fun creating more customized maps and more beautiful natural scenery myself. So in combination with lots of inspiration from another content creator called Sully, I think it's due time that we take some of the rather boring nature I've created here and spice it up a bit. And as you might be able to see, I've already changed the map texture pack using the MapTextureReplacer, just as I've just done in the European build I just made. But we're gonna do much more than just that, because I've pretty much just resorted to dense forests surrounding the outskirts, or the current outskirts of Riverview, leading up to the mountains. And we're gonna change these areas dramatically and hopefully make them much more interesting. And as a fun little thing, I'm also thinking about calculating the height of these peaks and giving all of them names, as I think that would be kind of cool. And I know a few of you are waiting for a train-oriented episode, in particular due to the result of the vote out here in Kendrick. And don't worry, it's gonna come as well, but I really feel that I need to change up parts of the map to kind of future-proof Riverview a little more, because the series is really starting to show its age. And if you enjoy my content, I would really appreciate a like, as that really helps out, and consider subscribing if you don't want to miss out on future videos or votes. Thank you. Alright, so let's get going. I think the first thing we're gonna do is start out with some revamps to the western part of the map here. We've got this gradual hill that kind of slopes up to the beginning of the first mountains, but in general I don't like this fully forested look. It's a little boring, and the hill is a little boring as well. So what I'd like to do is actually have some, don't know if you'd call them foothills, but some small hills and plateaus that kind of lead to the major mountain range here on the western part of the map. So instead of a very smooth gradual transition into the mountains, I'd like this to be much more wild as an area. So we're just gonna pause the game, and then I'm gonna mark out some spots where I would like to elevate like do some terraforming to kind of elevate it into hills and small peaks. And the first thing we're gonna do to mark this out is that I'm actually just gonna grab the tree brush here, and then we're gonna increase the strength, and we're gonna deselect specific type, and then I'm just gonna start mapping out these hills by removing the trees here. Because then we can have this dense forest in between these hills, which I think is gonna be pretty nice. And at times I'm going to connect or rather extend from an existing like elevated segment, and then just extend that further down into the town where it makes sense. We could do the same over here as well. Just gonna enable Anarchy so I can just move outside the boundaries as I want to. And we're gonna go right next to Myrtle Park and the fullest extent of some of the suburbia as well. So we've already got quite a few areas mapped out now. And I would also like to have a lake somewhere in here as well. So I've gotta keep an eye out for that as well. But we might be able to build that up here. Alternatively down here, I think we're just gonna... Let's see, is this the spot we would want? I think I'd like to create a lake in this area here, because then we can kind of let that drain into the major canal here, or the major river at least. So let's just specify a place for a lake here. So what I'm gonna do is just gonna lower the ground here a bit, right click, and then see if I can, if we're low enough, we probably need to go just a bit deeper than that. Something like this. And then we're just gonna kind of fill out this area here. And of course there's gonna be a bit more of a slope here, but we can kind of reduce how drastic this is. Right click up here and then just bring that up in a more steady manner. or a bit more of a gradual slope basically, and then of course come in with the soften tool to kind of soften out everything so it doesn't look all that obvious that we've went with some guard mode here. So I'll just start by using the WaterFeatures mod to place a small lake as the first thing, because it's gonna take a little while for that to fill out. And I need to right click to designate the water surface elevation, and since this is the lowest shoreline, this is probably where I want to right click somewhere alongside this contour line. That's probably a pretty good fit. And then I'm just going to place my source in here, and as we hit play, the water will start filling out. Anyways, moving on from the small lake here, I am going to once again jump into some landscaping tools because we're gonna start creating these hills now. So we're gonna go for shift terrain, and then instead of using the default brush, I'm gonna find one of these mountain brushes as well, because that's gonna it's gonna make the terrain just a little more jagged and edgy. I think I prefer this one, Mountain 03 brush. And we're going to increase the brush size to 150, but I'm gonna be pretty conservative on the strength because I don't want to go too crazy. I'm just gonna do a little tester here and try and raise this, then take a look, and that's pretty much the look I'm going for really. And then my idea was that we'd go in here and we'd grab the wild bushes brush here, and then maybe lower the strength a bit, and then just kind of throw in a bunch of bushes primarily as a start. Let's just see how that looks. I think that looks pretty good actually. So I'm at least gonna use the very same brush for the next couple of hills here. And I am already pretty content with how this is starting to look, how we've got these foothills that kind of transition into the mountains, and we have this really hilly, cool terrain. I'm just looking for like Gandalf and Gimli and some hobbits to traverse through this area with a bunch of urukais after them. But Lord of the Rings nerdiness aside, our small lake has filled now, and it's turned out quite well. So something I'd like to do is create a few additional small lakes up here in the hills actually, and I guess the idea is that they kind of change in size throughout the year as the snow and ice starts melting off the mountains as we transition into the spring. So I'm gonna do my best to try and create these. And yeah, they're probably gonna be pretty small in scale up here, but there are a few areas such as this one, which is actually almost ready for just placing like a small lake here. So we're gonna go ahead and try that as well. And make sure that your radius is quite small, because you can quickly have the river overflow. And now I just gotta establish like the level I want. So something like this, and then this is a small spot, so I'll reduce the radius even further, and then just let that fill out. Oh, and here's a cool little trick, by the way. If you're doing water manipulation and you just don't have time to wait for things to settle, if you jump into your developer mode menu and go to simulation and water, then you can speed up the water sim to max, and it's going to continue until it's either gonna overflow or it's gonna reset itself to 0 when your lake is all filled out. So I guess in this case we can see that I've actually placed my water source too high up on the contour lines, because it's actually overflowing through this little part here. So what I will of course need to do is I'm gonna find a contour line in here instead, this one. Let's see, I'm gonna go a bit more conservative, and let's just grab this one here. And then we're gonna reduce the size to 5, and we're gonna place that anew, and hopefully that works. And I think we're good and ready to create another little lake. And just look at the view up here. It's really gonna be ample opportunity to create some fantastic campgrounds around here. And I guess that's also why rent and house prices are completely bonkers here in Riverview. It really is a nice city, and you've got wilderness all around, just ready to be used for recreational purposes. But I guess enough about that. We've got our third lake here. I may be creating some more, but I want to jump into something a bit different, because one of the techniques that I really think is a key takeaway from Sully's video is the usage of piles to create some cliff sides. And we've got some obvious spots here that are really good for testing this out on. Now, if you really want this technique to look good, whoops, damn. Let's just find what I need. Pile, small, low, that gets me what I need. Then you manually place each of these, and you make sure that they are sort of follow the vertical contours of the cliffside. But that's gonna take a long time, and I figured that if you actually use it as a brush, and you just reduce the size, then you can, in my opinion, get most of the effects, but with less effort. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ensure Anarchy is enabled, and then I'm just going to sprinkle these all over the cliff sides here. And then in a moment, I'm gonna pick the garbage one, which, yeah, I know it's garbage, but it looks pretty good, the texture. And then I'm going to add that to the very same areas. So if we just start out with, let's just start out with this cliffside here. Then we're gonna pick the garbage one, and we're just gonna go through and add another layer, and we're just painting here with the brush. So it's just adding hundreds of these. Now a little disclaimer, I don't actually know what this is gonna do to the performance. I don't know how many triangles are in these piles, but if we go by the fact that thieves are modeled, there are probably 20,000 triangles or something like that. But then that's pretty much what we need for now. The next thing, and that's the really cool trick Sully figured out, if we grab the soften terrain tool and reduce the strength, then as you can see, as we just move over to soften the terrain, then all these piles actually conform to the terrain rather nicely. Now we do have some open gaps here and there, but we can very easily cover that up with boulders and with bushes, or even with some pine trees. So what I'm just gonna do is I'm gonna open up my search again. I'm gonna grab the random boulder, and then one thing you can do is actually just to place multiple again, and then go really heavy here near the bottom of the cliff. And once again, if you place these manually, it is going to look better. So this is just my bang for the buck technique. And then I'm just gonna sprinkle them on top of the actual cliffside as well, just carefully. Not carefully, just randomly is what I'm trying to say. And then I'm just gonna move through, and whenever I see some edges, I'm just gonna cover them up. But basically this technique works rather well, and like there's no open edges here at all. So this is a very easy way to very quickly create some decent looking cliff sides. And yeah, once again, you can place them manually, and that is going to look better. But I mean, I like to find something that I think gives maybe 80% of the outcome, but just takes less time. And then I'm just gonna move through and sprinkle in some small bushes. We might as well go for an actual... I'm gonna use the small versions here, and we can just go really quickly and then have a larger concentration near the edge here. And then something I found that looks really cool as well is to just use the spruce trees and just add in a few as well, especially near the boundaries, and just sprinkle them in as well near the boulders. Spruces or pine trees are pretty resilient trees. They will grow wherever they can, underneath the tree line at least. and let's have a look. That looks pretty sweet. Especially from out far, you don't really see some of the finer details that are obviously missing when we go in closer, because I didn't really manually place it. But generally, I think this looks good enough for the amount of effort. Alright, so with this proof of concept in place, this quick and dirty way of creating a cliffside, I think we're gonna hold off on adding it to every cliffside on the map as of now, and instead I'm going to continue creating more lakes, transferring some of the mountains, not just on the western side of the map here, but we're also gonna move to the south and the east and do the very same thing. So it's gonna be all about creating those natural scenic areas. Alright, so for a quick little recap, I tried the technique with the piles on a mass scale here by kind of decorating this entire cliff wall, and I think from afar the look is actually pretty good, and it does its job. As we move in closer, you'll start to see some issues due to me not manually placing all of these piles, but once again it would really take quite a long time to do that. But as we zoom out, I am really happy with how this area has turned out. Spend a lot of times making sure these lakes look pretty good, and making sure that the trees kind of, you know, they kind of expand up in a line wherever we have a valley with some conditions that are good for trees. Did the same thing over here where it kind of snakes its way up this mountain. Went for a different type of hillside on this mountainside over here, which I also quite like. Looks a bit random. An additional lake here, and then over here made it a bit hilly as well. Removed the trees, but you know, they could grow here. I just think this looks a little more interesting, and it's the same deal over here where I used a different brush, which creates this a very rugged look where you have the cliff textures kind of poke through along the grass here. So pretty happy with how this has all turned out. And I think that concludes time spent on making the natural scenery more beautiful here in Riverview for this episode at least, because I also would like to get just a bit of building done. And we're gonna keep it simple and just try to satisfy some of the very high demand we've got here in Riverview. It's been a while since we've actually really expanded or upped the density, and we're gonna do the latter, just upping the density here on the main island primarily, but maybe also in East Riverview. This is of course gonna bump our population. It's gonna make the city look even more dense and build up, and it's also going to allow us to continue working on the downtown and providing an even more impressive skyline as we move along. So I think the first area we're gonna start with is around Cedar Brook and Palmer. These two neighborhoods are primarily low density as of now, and I'd like to change that. At least this corner here of Cedar Brook I think would be more fitting with some higher density stuff. So we're just gonna pause the game, and then I'm gonna grab an alley and just let's see, we'll remove snapping to guidelines, and then we're just gonna drag this behind the road that is facing the main road here, so that we've got an additional layer of roads. We're gonna grab the pavement path, and then I would like to try and split up the zoning here a little more evenly, something like that. We'll create a park here, I think. So we're just gonna remove this house, remove this zoning, remove all the houses, and then we're just gonna go for some row density, yeah. Some medium density row housing, North American style of course. And we're gonna upgrade this row of single family homes as well. I'm gonna make sure not to zone this one here, because I want to make sure that they're aligned towards Spring Lane and not Elizabeth Lane. We are going to, let's see what we can do here. If we add an additional road here, expanding this lane, that should provide us with a few additional zoning options. Maybe I can use the keys here to align the zoning the way I want it. I think I can, yeah. Then we're gonna remove all these homes, and we're gonna give it the same row house treatment. Gonna leave some trees in between that we already have here. I think that's fine. Try and create a bit of open green space and just break up the build environment just a bit. Don't want this to be a rough area of any sort. It's still gonna be quite desirable. You are so close to a bustling downtown, and you're of course also very close to you know, hikes in the mountains or actual mountaineering. Let's see, we've got some more houses here that could use a bit of row house treatment. But otherwise, I think that's a good start. So what we could do is move in with some mixed zoning and just general upgrades to the area here. But I think what we're gonna do first is we are going to revamp the road layout here in Cedar Brook. because I think this was built a little hastily at first. What I want to do is have a patterned row house district here as well. So we're gonna see if we can find the road here and just drag that through. And then hopefully that's going to create a bit more room for some row house zoning. That didn't work. Oh, the zoning in this game. Why do I have to fight with it? I guess this is the best we can do. It's just not gonna work for some reason. Oh well. Gonna continue our road. Going straight and then try and connect up here. And then hopefully the road's gonna play nice in here then. Yeah, no. Whatever, it's fine. It's just a little annoying. Anyways, this leaves us with some more zoning opportunities, of course. And unfortunately, we can't actually zone here towards this lane as it's all angled towards the street. But we can zone in here, at least. And we can grab our keys to try and get the alignment we want. Something like this. Or do I actually want alignment towards this road at first? Yeah, I think I do. Great, so we'll grab our row housing. And we'll go 3 deep. And then we'll just break it up with a path. Just the symbols of paths. Gonna connect down here. More row housing, and more row housing. I'm gonna leave a bit of space in between the gardens that are gonna spawn so that we can add a few more trees and just continue keeping everything nice and lush looking. And I think single family housing here is probably fine. And then we've got amber room here alongside Madison Street for some much higher density zoning. So we'll go for a... Oh wait, it is actually aligned towards Applegate Lane. Cool, so we'll go row housing here. Then we'll go for a mixed use. And maybe even a high density. Well, actually, I guess this is just one. But we can hopefully break that up. Or we're gonna have to let the path stay to even do... Yeah, okay. Okay. There we go. So lots of upzoning here. I'm keeping the low density commercial here. And then maybe just use some of the surface tools to make it look a little more connected. It's always odd to zone at these curves, unfortunately. And we've got space here for a row house. And I'd say Sycamore Street has a fine level of density. I really tried to create like a low density commercial shopping area here. And I think that look is something I want to keep. But alongside Main Street, we can start upzoning all the way down to the crossing here with Sycamore Street at least. So we're gonna jump in with some medium density and start sprinkling that in wherever we have some low density housing. We have our commercial, as in this case, and maybe some low rent housing here. We'll do a bit of medium density here and maybe a mixed use, and finally another medium density here. And then I'll probably have to do a bit of row house zoning here. Otherwise, it's just gonna be left empty at least. And with that upzoning, I think it's due time I upzone this to row housing as well. And then dezone this to place a few more trees. And we'll do the very same over here. Get this turned into row housing and ensure we don't have anything here. So we've got plenty of trees. Because if you remember from a previous episode, Victoria Peak is like a small attempt at like an upper west side, upper east side area where there's actually plenty of nice park space in between the row houses, and you are so close to downtown. It's a fantastic place to live. So we've actually already upzoned quite a bit and haven't hit play yet, so it's gonna be very exciting when we do, to see how the nature of these neighborhoods change, how the overall population figure change. But before we hit play, we're gonna do even more upzoning to get an even more dramatic effect. So we're gonna move over to East Riverview, where we've got a pretty steep drop off to low density pretty early on. And I just want to densify the city a bit, because then we can also make some improvements and expansions to the downtown some other time at least. So we are gonna go ahead and do the very same thing. We're gonna select lots of low density areas and just gonna bump that to row house density for starters. I guess we can keep the opening here. And I still want, what I've done so far for East Riverview is I've just sprinkled in some low density here and there to just kind of make a gradual transition so that it isn't as sharp. And I think that's fine. I want to continue to do that. I just want that transition to be a bit further out. So in this case, for instance, I'm going to zone just upzone all this to row housing. And then out here, I'm just gonna zone a bit of row housing, so that we've got that gradual transition. As we move alongside Summit Street, which is like the main street of East Riverview, as you can see, we are going to upzone some stuff as well. I'm gonna bring in some medium density housing. So a 3x3, a 2x6. Let's see, we can do a bigger one here. And maybe even bring it all the way out here. We can have some low rent housing as well. Something like this. Maybe even some mixed. Since we are on the corner lot here, we could do a bit of mixed here as well. It's gonna be a pretty large asset. And we might even upgrade this to a high density commercial. Do the very same thing here. And I quite like that we've got these small pockets of low density single family housing in between. I don't really have a problem with that. But we are actually getting some decent upzoning here as well. And I think we're gonna continue alongside Summit Street here. So this entire area here is gonna be upzoned to we're gonna get some some mixed housing here, followed up with some medium density. We're gonna do some row housing and some row housing, and sprinkle in some medium density here as well. We should see some pretty big changes with all of this. And we've got Foggy Lane here. Gonna continue the row housing just a bit. Bring that transition a bit further out, upping the density. Something like this. Alright, so I'm just about ready to hit play and see the simulation grind to a halt. But just to get some numbers down first. Cedar Brook is currently sitting at 549 residents. Palmer is mainly a commercial shopping area, so 69. And as we move over to East Riverview, we've got about 9,645 because this is a massive district. So I'm gonna hit play, and it's gonna be very interesting to see how much this is gonna bump the population. The total population is hovering around 64,160. And while we wait for things to fully spawn and grow, we've got a bit of a traffic issue here on Bedford Street, leading to the major roundabout here in downtown East Riverview. So I'm hopeful that a 5-lane asymmetrical road might be able to alleviate some of the issues we're seeing. And that caused zoning issues, because why not? This is City Skylines 2. And in general, this is still a bit of a tough spot. This is just a small lane, so I'm going to try actually banning left turns altogether. And then just removing the traffic light if I can. Yeah, and I'll remove the crosswalks as well. Let me just see, did I make sure to ban everything? I think I did. There we go. So it's gonna be a bit of chaos, but then hopefully that clears up. And while we are waiting for things to grow, we might do a little detailing of the traffic circle we've got here. And I can't see anything because of the sun, so let's just see if we can we change that a bit? We can. Got a bit of a texture glitch, but it's not too bad. Alright, let's go and grab a nice surface. We'll go with some sort of tile that looks good. Could be... Let's see, this one is pretty fancy. It's certainly gonna stick out. Hopefully not like a sore thumb. No, that looks pretty good actually. And then for the simple detailing, I'm thinking, you know, a food cart or two is probably gonna be sufficient. Maybe even one over here as well. Get yourself a bit of food. Grab a table set. And nothing over here. There's gonna be a mixed density here with a storefront, so I think that's fine. But we could probably use a little birch or something. Or a few big ones even. In a symmetrical pattern. There you go. And then on the corner here, to really densify this area, let's grab a high density office. Just upgrade this. Get a high rise instead. Oh, and here's a cool little densification trick we can do as well. When I initially zoned this, then due to the weird footprint of the rail yard, where it also includes some landscaping, which is so weird, I was kind of restricted to just having this small row house lined street here. But with the Anarchy mod, we can, and the PloppableRICO, we can pretty much just plop the row houses so that they move deeper into the actual like footprint of the rail yard, and I'm thinking that's gonna look much better. We can even do like should I even be able to do like a mixed use building here on the side, but let's just start with the row housing and checking how that looks. So level 3 is probably fine, and I think we'll go 5 deep. It's gonna include like a rock in their garden, but I mean, that's not really a problem, is it? No, it's not. So I'll just start from here, and then we can just plop these in. And that should look much more natural than having the weird landscaping. It's also going to, of course, add a bunch of more homes, because these level 3, especially this zoning depth 1 times 5 should be much better. Let's see if we can grab some mixed. And what's that? Is that gonna be a lift? It is. Okay. So we're gonna go for a lift. 3 times 4 maybe. That looks very fancy. Actually, what I'm doing is probably wrong. I need a... Do I need a right? Yes, that's what I need. And I think we'll just do this one here. And as an additional thing, I'm going to extend Summit Street so that it doesn't turn into a highway just that fast, because then we can upzone this area here. And I think given the proximity to the river, a great location for a nice view, and the continued demand for medium density, I've found a particular European medium density level 4 building. This one here, which I think would be a really nice fit. Now, I know it's in the European theme, but the architecture is just a bit weird and all over the place, which I guess is a strength for me, because then I can just place it, and it would be fun to maybe place it at a bit of an angle. And this should add a ton of additional housing units, because I imagine these towers can actually, like, do have quite a few apartments in them. And we get one all the way up near the highway bridge. Just move it like this. There we go. Oh, and before I forget it, while we let the simulation chug along to have people settle in, we're going to start naming the what I am losing population. Okay. It's stabilizing. Yeah, I don't even know what's going on anymore. Anyways, we're gonna name some of the mountains and establish their heights as well. So a cool thing I found out is that if you've got the WaterFeatures mod, then when you right click to create a lake, it's actually going to tell you the elevation of the terrain you right clicked on, which is the elevation above sea level. So what we can gather from this is that Riverview is around 600 meters above sea level, which I think is perfectly fine, makes sense. What we can of course do with this is that if we want to establish the, let's say, the tallest peak of the city, which is probably the peak we've got here, then we can pretty much just find the tallest contour line, which is here, and right click, and we see that we've almost got a 3000er here in Riverview. Not quite, but this is the tallest mountain at 2804 meters. And then what I want to do, and I know this is a bit weird and nerdy, but I am a weird nerd, is I'm gonna create a district, and then we're going to name it. And I'm just gonna come up with some names, but I'm imagining you guys have some better suggestions perhaps. And that was the actual height, right? Yeah, thereabouts. So we've got Silver Peak, which is the tallest mountain of the region, and the only one, at least within the map limits, that is constantly snow-capped. At least it's been through all of fall, so I assume that, well, maybe during the summer there's no snow, but it's really a testimony to how tall it is. And I'm wondering how tall this one over here actually is then, because it's actually quite a bit lower, but it does really stand out in this mountain range here at least. But we're gonna do the very same thing. Let's find the actual peak. Seems to be here. Oh wow, it's like more than 500 meters lower. That's pretty crazy. That's not apparent to me, but yeah, maybe that's just my eyes. 2268. Let's just round that up. 2268. All right, so we're gonna say 2268 meters, and I'm just gonna call this Mount Queen due to my lack of creativity. Once again, open to suggestions. And my guess would be that this mountain over here is the third tallest peak, at least on the map, but I could be wrong because we've also, I mean, the peaks over here are actually quite tall. It just doesn't look as dramatic because there's like there's a big plateau here with a couple of lakes, but we'll see which one is actually taller. So let's just get a measurement going over here. I think this is the peak. Oh, it's actually taller than Queen's, what did I call it? Mount Queen? Really? Wow, that's a pretty interesting visual oddity. Or maybe I'm just completely blind. Once again, that's a possibility as well. Was it obvious to you guys that this one is actually taller? Anyways, 2336. So we're gonna map that out. 2336, and I like that it actually named the district Chestnut Peak, which could be the name of the actual mountain. But that's not what we're gonna call it. Let's call it Boulder Point. And this bad boy sits at 1574. Let's see. Was it actually 15 or was it 16? It was 15, great. And have to create a name on the spot. Always a little awkward. We can say Thunder Mount. And lo and behold, we've actually crossed 70,000 people, and the current trend is that we're still growing quite rapidly, which is awesome because we've still got residential demand as well, so we can really set up for further expansion in the future. But I think that's a wrap for this episode. So a bit of everything really, some densification, making the city just feel and look bigger, but also a lot of emphasis on natural landscaping, just to make the whole map a lot more interesting and a bit more future-proof. And I think as we zoom out, it really looks much better than before. The texture replacement on its own really does a lot, but just working a little more manually with these mountains and kind of creating these foothills really adds something. Very happy with the result. And I think that's pretty much a wrap then. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got any feedback or input, I'd be really curious to hear. I'm very happy with the changes we've made, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Goodbye.